Hello everybody, welcome back to the workshop. So in this video, I'm going to be making a handheld H13 Slitter. This slitter is for taking and opening up pockets for different things like pocket welds of all kinds. You can use it for opening up slots on the end of a bar. You can use it for splitting open areas like on the end of a bar for making like bird's mouths or to draw out two different sections. Again, I'm making it handheld, so this way it'll be most utilitarian for me and for my purposes later on, if I don't drop it clear to the bottom of the fire, which I just did. Gotta love when that happens. So we're going to be playing around a little bit with some H13 today. And I can tell you from experience, H13 at any heat done by hand is very resilient. So when you hit it, you want to hit it with just enough force to drive the mass all the way through the piece. When you hit this, it's like hitting 1-inch round cold, even up at a really bright heat. So we've established some flats. I'm going to get it hot again. Once I rebuild the coke in the center of my fire so it doesn't drop down again. And fire that up a little bit more. So even working out something like this, if you've noticed, I've switched to using a 3-pound hammer. I count this as kind of like my striking sledge here. I do not condone using big heavy hammers like this. This is an 8-pound short handle sledge. For anything more than maybe taking and punching in a drift, using it on a drift or something of that nature, or using it two hands on a piece if you need to take and do some sort of upsetting operation in the vise. That's what I've got that hammer for. It's mainly used to hit tooling where it's inconvenient on this side of the anvil to have a long-handled sledgehammer, and I can't get the space inside my small shop. So the interesting thing about making a tool out of H13 is H13 is an air hardening tool steel. It gets very, very hard, and H13, to my understanding, has a very interesting property in it of the way that it actually gets tempered. Now, it has a whole range that you can do, but I don't have the technology in my shop to be able to do the proper heat treatment, if you will, on H13 according to do it by the book. But what I have found through experience of playing with it is if you take and forge out your item to shape, then you grind it and you let it cool down, you grind it, and you do your relative all the other things to it, right? And say you never let it drop down below what would be considered a critical temperature as you forge the material. What I have found is that that will leave the tool somewhat softer. So it will leave it more tough than it is hard. But if you take that chunk of H13, you throw it back in the fire after everything's ground, bring it to a critical temperature and bring it back out and let it sit. And I'm talking critical temperature as in what you would look at like a piece of 1045 or maybe 1075 is probably more like it. What that would look like at critical temperature, if you bring that out of the fire and you let it cool slowly in the air, it will get glass hard. It will get really, really super hard. And in fact, it can get so hard that it will literally, it can chip. You can actually chip pieces off of it, and it almost becomes too brittle. So depending on what you're doing, that may or may not be what you want. H13 does have pretty good impact resistance, but it's more of like an abrasion type resistant steel and a hot work steel. It works a lot better as a tool that'll be used, say, under a press, where you're going to have a lot of compression strength, and it needs to resist that compressing strength. So H13 is good in those departments. Again, S7 would be a lot better. John Switzer over at Black Bear Forge has talked about S7 tool steel that he likes to use for a big majority of like his punches and his tooling and his chisels and things like that. I'll leave a link to his channel down below in the description, and also a link to one video where he had talked about that, about his S7 tooling that he uses, and maybe you can find that informative there. So again, working out H13 is a bit of a booger by hand, especially if you're working on a short chunk. The reason why I'm working on a short chunk and not on a much longer bar, if I can pick this up, and not on a much longer bar of this stuff, is because if I were to work on a longer bar in whatever section I did not use, I didn't cut off the bar that got up to critical temp, it would be hard on that end, and it would be almost impossible to do any shaping on it after that point. It gets really, really hard, and it gets brittle, like I said. You heat it back up to that second critical temperature, and then you've got a tool that's outran what you specifically designed it to be. So now this would be a pretty boring video if I just continue to leave it like it is. It's probably already a boring video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something that I rarely do in my videos. I'm going to go over to the power hammer to speed up the flattening and drawing out of this process. Now you can do this by hand, but it does take quite some time, and it makes for a pretty boring video. So we're going to head over to the power hammer, and we're going to give it a little bit of thumpage. Now that I've got a good bit of the draw out work done over at the power hammer, and man alive, was that a lot of work. I forget every time I work with H13 how much work it really actually is to take and draw this stuff out. Now I've got all the work done over at the power hammer, I'm going to take and get this slitter nice and straight. As you can see, I've got a really narrow profile on this slitter. And the purpose of this narrow profile is to be able to really get in and slice some pretty thin material to much effect. Now I'm going to grind most of this end here to shape. It doesn't like to be worked cold. Heck, it doesn't even like to be worked hot. But it's beautiful material to forge stuff out of. So I'm just getting that all straightened up, looking, inspecting, making sure the forging's still clean. I don't got any cold shuts or anything like that. So that's the one end of the slitter. Now I need to go ahead and flip it around, and we need to take and draw out this section to a comfortable holding handle. So we'll do that now. Okay, so now that we've got that back end all drawn out, we are going to come out with this piece, and we're just going to make sure everything's squared up. Everything's like it's supposed to be before we call it good. We can clean up a little bit of any untrueness with this. We mainly just want the blade to be right in line. Want the blade of the slitter to be right in line with the rest of the tool. You're going to notice even at this heat, it does not like to move at all. So we're going to take and call that good. Now I'm going to go ahead and leave it as forged, just like you see here. We're not going to do anything else to this at this point in time. Now we're ready to take and do the grinding work. We're going to put an edge on this thing. I'll come back with you after, I'll come back with you after we take and get this thing all ground up, and then we'll test it out on a piece and see how this tool holds up. Earlier on in the video, as I had spoken, I was talking about, you can do this by hand at the anvil, but you just got to give yourself some time and take a break. Now, I will say something about the H13. This H13 I bought out of 1 3/8, I believe it is. No, it was 1 1/4 in diameter H13 material. If you are going to be making tools like this, I would highly suggest you pick a different size or dimensionality of this. I would go something sub 1 inch, maybe something in the realm of 5/8 or 3/4 of an inch. So that would be somewhere around the realm of 16 to 20 mil in diameter, and maybe go with round rod. And that will make a good amount of punches and slitters and drifts and things like that out of H13 for you if you do not have a power hammer, and it will be more manageable to be able to work down by hand at the anvil. That large chunk that you've seen me working on, that is not what I would consider something that you would want to take and do in the future at hand, by hand. So let me go get this ground. We'll grind this up real quick, and I'll be right back with you, and we'll test it out on something. Okay, everybody, so here we are. I went ahead and did the finish grind on this. It was basically just more of the same until you get it shiny. Main purpose here, we want a really nice thin slitter. That's what I was going for this. This is great for like opening up tines on forks. You can split out tines very nicely. And because of the narrow profile, the narrow cutting profile, you don't have as much problem as suck down into a cut. So now I'm going to practice on a piece of 1/2 inch square mild steel, and I'm going to see how this thing cuts. With this narrow profile, it should cut fairly quick, but the problem with the narrow profile as well, you might get some bending or bowing if we leave it in too long. So we will have to watch the heat on this a little bit. Even though it's H13, we'll still want to be careful with it. So here I go. I'm going to come out here, and let's see how much we can get done on this 1/2 inch bar, or 12 mil, in a short period of time. Inspecting the tool for cracks. It's kind of giving me some fits here, trying to hold it square. It's doing good. So far, so good. I didn't bring it out nearly as hot as I could have. So let me go ahead and heat that up again. This pocket's working pretty well so far. If this works out good, I'll probably make a couple other different size width slitters like this, just to make slot punches and bars for pass-throughs, angular pass-through joints, things like that. There's several different ways that you can make slot punches or slitters. They're two different things. Slitters are usually something that has a bevel on them, so they kind of just cut and push out to the sides, as where punches, like a slot punch, is usually flat bottomed and it removes an entire space, or it compresses a slug that you then shear out of the piece. Slitters generally take and keep more material around the eye, but slot punches are a little more accurate in my opinion. You don't have to dress out a cut line at the end of the cuts, so you get more of like this teardrop shape. Let me take off my gloves here. You can get this teardrop shape if you're not careful after you drift something with a slitter, versus a slot punch is more of an ovular shape like this. So when it slot punches through, you're only opening it a little bit, and it usually comes to, there's less chance of having that little teardrop look at the end of your cut whenever you drift it open. But so far through this 1/2 inch bar, if it was hot enough when I first brought it out, it wasn't quite hot enough. Now it is. Now it's where we want it. We're gonna get that stacked on there. Use our hot slitter right down through the center of the bar. It's going really nice and quick. I'll flip it over, aim for the other half of the bar, aim for what looks about center. And that should open up my slug, which it did. It split out that slug there. So go over the hardy hole of the anvil, just so this way I protect the anvil face. You want to be careful with the slitter itself on your anvil face, because this slitter is hard. It's a lot harder than your anvil face. So there we go. We've got a pretty nice little slot punch there. Let's try to drift that open while we're at it. At this point, I'd just like to say thank you if you've made it this far in the video. Thank you for joining me today as I look for my drift. I can never find that thing when I'm looking for it. As soon as I turn away, it'll show up again. Always has to happen live on camera like that. Wouldn't you know it? Go figure, eh? This isn't even the right drift, but let's see what I can find here. Let's see if I can find my slitting punch. Over here, excuse me for a second. Yeah, I found something I can use as an opener. That ought to get it pretty close. Don't want to keep you all too long. As I was saying, I just want to thank you all for being here today. I hope you've enjoyed this video so far. I've enjoyed making it for you. A little bit of a different video today, but I hope you were able to pick up some helpful tips out of it. Again, this is just something that I'll probably make more of these. This looks like it's holding up pretty well. Only time will tell. I need to make sure that I won't end up getting any sort of fractures or anything like that, because when I was working this material, it did get awfully cold on this end while working on this end, and that could introduce some stress cracking. So I'll have to keep a watchful eye on it here into the future and see what I come up with. So now I'll just use this little punch, if you will, as a drift. And now I can add this other punch in here. Now I'll heat that up one more time, and you guys can see how quick and effective that is at making some pretty nice holes there. And again, that's just starting with a longer slot. So starting with a longer slot, I can get a much broader hole inside of a 1/2 inch bar. And if you've noticed, I haven't had to go quench my tooling or anything. And it appears that that edge has really held up. That edge has really held up pretty well, so I'm happy with that. I'm pretty pleased with that. Again, whenever you're working with H13, it is going to be harder than most of all of your anvils, so be very careful. Be very careful with it. It will cut into your anvil. I'm not worried about your tool here, but you can really gouge up an anvil pretty bad if you're not too careful. So just keep that in mind if you are going to make them. With that being said, again, I just want to thank you all for being here today. Thank you for watching this video. Thank you for liking the videos and supporting Jessica and I with what we do here at Christ Center Ironworks by sharing these videos around with your friends and on all your social media platforms. We do greatly appreciate that. And if you guys would like to support financially, a great way of doing that is checking out our website over at blacksmithpdfs.com. So without further ado, I'm going to get back to smithing and get on with it for the rest of the day. I hope you all have an absolute blessed day, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for watching.